Hey there, welcome. Thanks for being here today. I hope this finds you well. We're at the end of January. Tomorrow is Imbolc, so we're coming right into spring, or at least in the Celtic tradition or Gaelic tradition, we're coming into that entranceway, that transitioning from winter, but the actual spring equinox is going to be a little ways away. So yeah, it's been a winter on my end. It's been a year. 2024 has been a year. And this January has seemed like it has lasted a very long time. And I wanted to share a bit of a personal story about this today. So, one of the questions is, how do we always know when we've healed certain parts of ourselves? And how do we know when we haven't? So how we know can have a variety of different expressions, but I think the overarching theme or quality of that is going to be a greater sense of freedom and deeper connection with a lot of nuances in there. And we'll talk a little bit more too about the aftermath of some of our healing and things to watch for, right? To be aware of. So it supports a deeper embodiment and wisdom process. So when I was sick, I had posted, because I felt like I had this clearing going on for, 3 to 4 weeks. I still have some coughing happening. But during that time, I was having a lot more memories coming up and a lot more heartache coming up around the death of my dog, Moki, in February of 22. And while I've worked through a lot of that loss, and because it's been a couple years, and have held him ever so tenderly in my heart still. I was aware that during the time when I had this cold or flu, for me these are cleansings, right? They're purgings, they're purifications. Yes, they happen on the physical level, but they're also happening on all levels of our energetic beings as well, because we can't be separated. We have a holistic operating system. Our technology is all encompassing of both our physical dense realms and our subtle realms. So I was aware that as I was, laying in bed for hours at a time in kind of that liminal healing state that allows deeper processing to happen and allows greater life force to flow, because the attention is inward. I'm resting and relaxing, which means I'm open. And that allows things to move out and life force to do its deeper work, because I'm not distracting my life force. So, so Moki was coming up, and I was aware of it, and I was, kind of like, okay, what's happening here? What have I not more deeply healed that he is showing up to me? And so I kind of sit with that, and I didn't really go into any emotions. I just kind of allowed myself to be open to whatever needed to be revealed. So fast forward, this was happening off and on. And then last week, I was feeling much better. I, was out in the world a little bit more, but I was still coughing a lot, right? I still had a lot of mucus and a lot of phlegm. And and a lot of water, right? So all of that, our lymph system, our waterways, the fluids in our body get backed up and gunked up with toxins in general. So when we have a cleansing, right? I did the video on this, sickness as a portal, right? That our sickness is a portal to other dimensions and to other experiences when we allow it to be. So I was really aware, I tend to carry a lot of grief, and felt like, well, I feel like I've moved this through. I've let Moki go. And after I was feeling better, it was one day, and I don't remember what day it was, but I was still coughing a lot, and all of a sudden, like, he just came to the forefront, and I felt overtaken with my grief of the loss of him. And part of that grief, the part that was hanging on, was stories and regret that I was holding. And, some guilt that I was carrying, that I didn't do certain things better, and I should have done this to be a better mom, and I wish I had been more present and, more patient and less occupied. But the bottom line was, I did the best that I could. And I was a really good mom. And yes, I had some issues, right? We're all human. We all have our moments. And maybe I was more distracted than I would have liked to have been. Not maybe, I was. And I'm going to just shadow that with, part of it was because my nervous system was so dysregulated that it was very hard for me to ground and become present. And I had a lot of anxiety about fur baby parenting. And the way that it was coming up to me when I was crying was, I loved too hard. And I feel like my anxiety created some anxiety for him. So, so those were some of the things that I felt like I would have wanted it to do better, and I felt like, maybe it wasn't as enjoyable for him, right? To be my, my fur child. And so what I had not really been able to do, and this was a telltale sign, I hadn't up until this point really been able to look at any of his pictures without experiencing too much heartache. So I wouldn't really look at the pictures. I wasn't ready, right? I wasn't ready to really feel the grief. And so what I did was I pulled up and I put all of his pictures in a file. I wish I had them in print, but a file on my computer. And I just bawled and bawled and bawled. And I talked to him, and I told him how much I loved him. I expressed the ways in which I feel like, I wasn't as attentive, or I didn't give him what he needed, that I was sorry for having so much anxiety, right? Like, I just kind of went through this list of my regrets. And I, spoke to him out in the ethers, and I just let myself feel the regret. I didn't try to talk myself out of the regret. I didn't try to make it better, right? And this is what we do for ourselves, and this is what people do for us when we're in grief. They want to make us feel better by, countering the experience that we have, whether it is accurate or not. There is a relevance to the experience that we're experiencing. And so since I was alone this time, I just let myself feel it all. And then I had some music, this really mellow, smooth, but like really nice, quiet jazz music that I would put on often in the late afternoon, mainly evenings though. And I would putz around the house and I would like hang out with him and I'd give him some Reiki, and it was a way that we both would chill out and decompress from the day. And I have not been able to listen to that playlist on Spotify, even though I really loved it and really enjoyed it. And I have tried to do it once over the past couple years. And when I did, it just brought up too much pain. And it just broke my heart all over again. And I have not been able to do it. So then I went through a second run of all of Moki's pictures, and I played my playlist in the background. And I let myself connect back to that timeline and how that was just like this. It was one of my favorite parts of the day, and it was the time when I could really just be there with him, and when we both kind of had this mellow time because I was mellowing out. And I just cried and cried and cried and listened, and I loved our house that we were in at that time, and I loved living there. I loved him. I loved my life. And with his death, like everything changed within, a couple months. Everything kind of collapsed. And there are spiritual reasons for that and multidimensional reasons for that I won't go into, but having to do with part of his purpose, part of his mission that he came to me, that we came together for, was very specific. And as much as 6 months before that, I was told that he was not going to be with me for that much longer. And I didn't really know what that meant. They didn't tell me when. They didn't give me any indication. So anyway, I'm getting on a tangent there. I want to stay on the healing piece. So when I finished listening to all of this and really allowing myself to go into the deeper grief of the loss of all of that, the loss of that chapter, and really honor it and really honor my experience of where I felt my shortcomings were. And within just a couple of hours, I started actually being able to think about him and smile with a sense of levity. I started to kind of like giggle at certain things. And my heart was now open with a lightness of being. And then I kind of dipped down again a little bit later And what was coming up was that I hadn't really forgiven myself. I hadn't deeply forgiven myself for where I was at that time, where I was at in my own development, where I was at in my own energetics and in my own nervous system. And I needed to really allow myself to know that I did the best that I could and forgive myself for the shortcomings that I wasn't able to embody or step into at that time. So then the next wave that came was I started having more memories of like the amazing mother that I was. Like, I mean, I was a pretty attentive mother. Part of that was anxiety driven, not the best. However, I was devoted to him and he knew it, right? And we had so much fun together. We spent so much time together. And so I was able to start really reflecting on our times at the park and walking and when we'd wrestle and when we'd, play catch and all this stuff in the house and we'd race around and, and snuggle times and all those things. And that's when I knew that my healing was moving through, because I was able to see the full spectrum of the situation. I was able to hold the full spectrum and be present with both, and even allow some tenderness. Even sitting here talking, I've had a couple moments where, I can feel that there's still emotion there because I just miss him so much. But it isn't laden with the guilt or the regret. But one of the lessons that came out of this, one of the lessons that came out of allowing myself to feel the guilt and regret and to get to the other side of recognizing, oh, I don't actually have to feel the guilt and regret. What I thought was the only reality was a snippet of the reality. And now I'm open to the bigger picture, which, is really lovely. And I can go forward, more and more feeling happy about the memories. But the lessons that I took away from was just this deep, and I guess I have this every time I go through a death, and I mean a death of another being, since I used to sit bedside with the dying. Every time I go through experiencing a death, I come home to the preciousness of the time that we have with others and the beings, the people, the things in our life that we're deeply connected to, that we're devoted to, that we love and that love us, and how much we take these things for granted. Because the outside world, the way that we're conditioned, takes us so much, so often outside of ourself, and then that disconnects us from others, right? It's a chain reaction. And when the more we are inside ourselves, right, the more we're in that peace and calm and in that grounded space, the more open we can be, the more present we can be. So it's another revisitation of what are the choices I can make today? Because there were definitely times where I did feel distracted, or I was anxious about different things, or felt like I needed to control certain things in my life, even though I didn't. But I couldn't quite let go either, in part because my nervous system was so dysregulated. Now I can see it more clearly and I can feel it more deeply. And there were times that I feel like we missed out on each other. That I missed out on him and he missed out on even something deeper perhaps that he was needing. And I missed out on being able to be that with him and for him. And so I get to take that forward, and I get to hopefully stay more mindful and stay more connected and really let the people in my world and in my life know when I'm with them, because I'm not great at this all the time. But really make more of a concerted effort, even if it's just dropping a note here and there. I had somebody drop me a note yesterday, I think it was, just from out of nowhere, and it was like, oh, yeah, that's what I want to do more of, right? When I'm with somebody, I want to be there, not multitasking. And the people that maybe I'm not in contact with as often, but still have a special place in my heart, I want to move forward, letting them know, even if it's just a sweet text, a random call, family or friends that don't live close by. How do I choose to be less busy and be more connected within my true alignment? So I just wanted to share that. I'm just going to follow up with one more, because this is not the first experience that I've had of this. And this is something that I work with clients with too, right? Getting to that completion and feeling the freedom of our healing, letting it go. Oh, that was what I was, that was the other piece. The forgiveness, part of why I was hanging on to the forgiveness or not forgiving myself was because that somehow, the pain of that kept me connected to him. That isn't the way I want to stay connected to him. That isn't the way I want my heart to feel activated or open because it's in pain, right? And so I recognize that by being forgiving of myself was sort of letting him go, and I had to just allow that to take place, which allowed then a new way of relating with those memories, with that part of me. So it was a beautiful experience. And we want to remember that our waters, our inner waters, carry our memory. So being sick, during that cleansing, during that purging, and all of the mucus, sorry to get gross, but all of the mucus and phlegm, right, had densified those memories. And they were finally moving out. That was the first time I'd been, I'd gone through a cleansing since 2018. So I was still carrying that, with that boy since 2022. So the last piece that I want to say, to just give a little bit more, I hope that you guys have recognized some of this in your life. So when I moved back here to the Midwest, to where I was as a teenager, I had a lot of self-judgment. I had a lot of shame. I had a lot of guilt. I had a lot of things that I didn't like about myself. And so part of coming back here was a way of really diving deep into that shadow work. And that's what I did. For about the first year and a half or so, I did deep work. And really, went down my own little rabbit holes and cleared and did my best to reconnect, with people that I felt like I needed to have clarity with and, make amends for, or even just, come to terms with what was. And so all of that, within that year, a city that I had so much like bad memories about, and oh yeah, I don't like it there, I think probably I even used like, oh, I hate it there. But that's because that was the reality that was inside of me. I wasn't fond of myself. And so when I came back here and I started doing all of this, all of a sudden I was in love, right? I'd go back to those places, parts of town, places where I'd lived. Like I went in and I reconnected with those timelines. I let myself feel everything about them. And then I would get free. And I had integrated them within me. And with each integration, I got a clearer view of me. Didn't mean that I wasn't taking responsibility for certain things, but I didn't have to carry around, myself in this big baggage of badness anymore. It was like, wow, yeah, that was kind of a, not the greatest thing to do, not the greatest way to behave, not the greatest decisions, so on and so forth. But once the pain was moved through, or the shame, or the guilt, or the anger, whatever it all was, I started falling in love. And that was key to me falling in love with myself. Because that time pocket was just a piece of time that I really didn't feel good about myself. And I didn't make choices that felt good about myself. So I didn't treat myself well. And I didn't connect with things that did treat me well. So now my reality is very different, And I think when it doesn't matter. I was going to go off on another little spiral. But that's it. So when we do this healing work, we can get a sense that we're complete when we start to get a fuller, more balanced picture of oneself, of others, of situations, circumstances, stages and phases in our own development. And as we move through that freedom, then all of that kind of drifts away and it just becomes a chapter. But if we're still ruminating, right, the same stories, the same pain, the same grief, the same blaming others, self, whatever that is, then we're still in process, right? We're still in that deep process. So I hope that was clarifying, and I hope that gives you, right, the encouragement that even though it's hard and painful to go into the old energy, you're not getting away from it by not addressing it. It's there, and it's wreaking whatever it's wreaking in the background. But when we can meet it head on, and it takes courage, right? And it takes courage. And it takes like a devotion to our freedom, to our healing. Even though it feels like sometimes maybe we're not going to get through it, we will. If we go into it, we will get through it. If we look at it, we will move beyond it. If we listen to those deeper voices, and maybe we don't even know what's coming up. Maybe I wouldn't have even known that Moki was coming up, but I just needed to have a good cry. Then have that good cry. And we get to set ourselves free. So with that, I am going to sign off. Have a fabulous wherever you're at. And if you could resonate with this, then that would be great. If you wanted to let me know by subscribing or liking. And if you have any experiences similar, I would love to hear those as well. Much love, many blessings, much freedom and joy.